Luxury home prices have surged nearly $200,000 in this one Atlanta city. Meanwhile, in another, inventory's up nearly 50%. The luxury market is starting to split. That and more coming up right now. So there's a lot happening in the Atlanta real estate market. In this video, I'm going to focus on the luxury market, which is basically prices that are $1 million or more. And I know what some of you might say, and you're not wrong. $1 million, is that really considered luxury today? I think it depends on what part of town. So $1 million and more, that's what all of these numbers are based on. And you can see what I mean by the market is splitting on this very first slide. But at a glance, prices are up 1.1% year over year. 1.1% is negligible. In the regular market, we've been stuck at 425 for 10 straight months. In the luxury market, we've been stuck at the median price really for a couple of years now. There's some ebb and flow, goes up a little bit, comes down, but it's been at this number, which we'll see a little bit later in the video, for quite some time. Meanwhile, days on market and months of supply are starting to tick up, and there's more real estate being sold than ever before, both in volume and closings, which we'll see here in just a little bit. In Atlanta, the luxury market represents about 10.5% of all units sold. Yet when it comes to volume, it's double. It represents almost 22% of all the dollars sold. Now, here's something that's very interesting. While the regular real estate market in Atlanta is struggling with declining sales, the luxury market is the complete opposite. As a matter of fact, in the month of June, with 455 sales, we've set a new record for the most sales in a given month at any time over the last 13 years. Now, the previous record wasn't that long ago. It was actually last spring, where we topped off at 421 transactions. Now, let's take a look at some of the notable sales that closed in the month of June this year. Now, first up is this beautiful estate property in Milton, Georgia. This property sold on June 11th for $7,250,000. It originally went to market for $8,975,000, which means that they sold it for roughly 81% of the original asking price. The buyer paid cash, got concessions of $7,500, and the property spent 255 days on the market. Now, both the listing and the selling broker in this transaction was Atlanta Fine Homes, Sotheby's International Realty. Now, this next property at over 23,000 square feet was an absolute castle. In Chastain Park, went to market for $8 million. They sold it in 532 days for $4.8 million. The buyer was represented by Virtual Properties Realty. The sellers were represented by Ainsley Real Estate, and roughly $50,000 of concessions were paid in this transaction. And then we've got this beautiful ranch in Alpharetta. It was on over 38 acres. Now, they originally went to market for $6.75 million. Took 1,251 days. It's a very specialized property, and they sold it for $4,025,000, roughly 60% of the original asking price. The buyer used financing. It closed on the 27th of June, and Atlanta Fine Homes, Sotheby's International Realty had both sides of the transaction. Now, I just showed you two of the last three properties that were on the north side of town. One was in Buckhead. And of course, when it comes to Buckhead, Buckhead is the pinnacle of Atlanta luxury. What I'm showing you right now is a chart of the total volume over the last 10 years. You're going to see where all the action is. So Buckhead's a no-brainer at number 1. Can you guess what number 2 through 15 are? Any surprises? What do you think? Drop a comment and let me know. That last chart was pretty cool, right? With the motion graphics. Don't sleep on this one. It's not animated, but the information is extremely important. This gives us a good idea of what's happening year over year in these little markets. And I'm using a rolling 12 months worth of data. What does that mean? So for the month of June, we're looking at the total volume leading up in all of those 12 months to that point. So for example, in Buckhead, you're almost at $1.2 billion worth of sales leading up to the end of June. Compared to the previous year, that's $128 million more than the previous period. So where do we have other nice bump ups? If you take a look at in-town, bump up. You take a look at Alpharetta, that's a big bump up. That's $131 million more sales this year, total volume, than in the preceding period. Milton's up. You take a look over here at East Cobb, that's up. Take a look at Cumming, that's up. Then you have still some gains. It's very similar markets. You know, you look at Johns Creek, that's almost the same thing. Canton was marginal. And then when you look at Sandy Springs, this year there were $153 million less transactions than there were in the previous period. So that's kind of surprising. especially since at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that there was one part of Atlanta that saw its median sales price go up by almost 200,000. So that's going to be interesting to look at, right? Because you have a lot less volume, but the median price is going up in those areas. So more on that in a little bit. And then Brookhaven and Suwanee are both down. So if you really want to know how a market's doing, you've got to look at months of supply. And that's what we're going to do right now. It'll tell you how healthy a market is based on whether it's a buyer's market, seller's market, or something in between, making it really easy on this chart to see what the in-between is. And it's this yellow/orange zone. The top of it, the red line, cross that line, you're into a buyer's market. Anything under here is a seller's market. So you take a look at Alpharetta and Milton. These two areas are now in a balanced market. And so the advantage is not to the buyer nor the seller in negotiating. So you'll get money off the price of the house. You'll get some concessions. Seller is more likely to fix stuff during an inspection. Kind of feels like 2018, 2019. A seller's market is what we have firmly in Johns Creek. My clients were involved in multiple offers in Johns Creek on $1 million plus properties very, very recently. And those properties, if they're in really nice shape, multiple offers, lots of showings, it's really good to be a sellers in Johns Creek right now. And you don't have enough inventory for the amount of demand because of, people love Johns Creek for the schools, the location. There's a lot to love about Johns Creek. Other areas where things have been kind of flat, you take a look at In-Town. Same thing as last year, 4.5. They're not trending up or down. They're nearing a balanced market, but they're not there. Trending up towards the balanced market, we've got Sandy Springs, you've got East Cobb, and you've got Suwanee. They're not there yet, but this time next year they might be. Now, Brookhaven is trending down a little bit at 3.8. That's always a very interesting market because they're building a ton of infill new construction. Location's phenomenal. I love the Brookhaven location. And then you take a look over at the greater Atlanta area and we're at 5.5 months of inventory. So if you've watched my other video for the traditional market this month, I'm going to drop the link right here for you to watch it after this video. Months of supply for the whole market in all price points is 3.2 months for single family homes. So you can see that the luxury market is quite a bit above that. Now, a couple of other interesting things. We have a couple of areas that are in buyer market territory. So Canton is one. It's been there for a little while. They've been building these beautiful houses on acreage up in Canton. I've featured a couple on this channel. And then take a look at Cumming. This is one of two data points on this slide that I really want to call out. That's not a small jump year over year. To go from 4.3 months of inventory to 6.3 is huge. Now, at the beginning of the video, I talked about two places where we saw stuff happening, right? The $200,000 in median sales price, and the other one was a 50% increase in inventory. So we'll take a look at that in just a little bit, but I was talking about the city of Cumming for that inventory. So there's a lot more listings for sale. Months of inventory have now crept up to 6.3, and you're now in a buyer's market in Cumming. Over the last couple of years, really the last decade, Forsyth County has been on fire, which is why so many builders have come into the area to build. When you think of Forsyth County, I can't think of another builder that's built more properties really than Toll Brothers. You go to the Toll Brothers website, check out Forsyth County. They've got, I think it's 12,000 neighborhoods. I featured Sterling Point. I featured a couple of them. And in Sterling Point, they were starting in the 7s and 8s. And by the time they were half built in that neighborhood, they were selling their homes for 1.5. They got 2.5 for that decorated model that I featured on this channel. If you haven't seen that video, you can check it out if you're into home tours. But that's one of the reasons that Forsyth County has now said, you know what? We're going to pump the brakes. We're going to halt permits for a little bit. We want to reevaluate and reassess where we are with all of this new construction because everyone's been building up that way. But now you're starting to have quite a bit of inventory, and it's going to be interesting to see because if they're not going to allow any new construction for the little bit, you could see this inventory start to diminish as new homes are not built to replace what's already built. We'll keep an eye on the city of Cumming. The other one that's really interesting on this chart is none other than Buckhead. It's bucking the trend, shall I say. This time last year, we were in buyer's market territory. This year, we've not only gone out of buyer's market territory, They completely cleared balance, and now they're just a hairline into a seller's market. I think that's really interesting. Now, I love looking at showing data. It's another very good metric to see what's happening with demand. On this chart, I'm taking a look this month at percentages of the overall showings. So for instance, take a look at Alpharetta. Out of all of the showings that happened in Metro Atlanta for properties that were above $1 million, Alpharetta up there with 14%, one out of 7-ish showings happened in Alpharetta. So people are looking at a lot of houses up that way. Buckhead's up 9.1%. Take a look at In-Town. It's down a little bit, 6.8%. Milton is not quite as high as you would imagine. You know, I think it's just a little bit further out, slightly higher price range, and 4.9%, down just a little bit. Remember when I said that Johns Creek right now is on fire? Well, take a look at this. They are getting 8.1 showings for every single listing that comes to market right now. That's huge. Let that sink in for a second, because if you take a look at everything else, it's between 2 and 4 per listing, with the exception of Suwanee at 5.6. It's got more than double, in some cases triple, the amount of activity per listing than in any other city in Atlanta right now. Now, here's a chart you should pay attention to. If you've watched my other video, this is a chart that I feature in the traditional video, and I think it's equally important to look at it here, because it's starting to show that even though we've had a record number of closings this month, more so than at any other point over the last 13 years, active inventory is starting to creep up. And you're starting to see a much bigger spread between the number of active homes available for sale and the closings that are happening. So if you go back 4 or 5 years to 2021, you had 378 closings in the month of June, and you had 950 active properties, roughly a 3-to-1 ratio. Well, today, even though we have a record high number of closings in a single given month, the number of active properties over $1 million in the 11 county area, pretty much a 5-to-1 ratio. It's the same thing as the overall market. So that's a divide that's starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just means that buyers now have more choices than ever. So if you're selling a property, unless you're in Johns Creek, if you're in Johns Creek, congratulations, you're going to get a lot of activity. And just like in the regular market, you're still in an all-out war for attention. On this one, we're going to look at new listings coming to market in the month of June compared to previous months of June. And you can see that this year, the line that is the navy is last year. This is a lot more coming to market every single month, and it's a heck of a lot more than in previous years. So it's helping to explain how that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Here it's broken down by city. I'm going to let you either pause the video, or if you want, at the end, I'm going to include a link to download my slide deck if you want this presentation to review at your own leisure, basically on your own time. Feel free. It's going to be in the description and in that first comments. Here are the active properties. So again, look at this big spread here compared to last year. And it's actually getting a little bit bigger here. So is this going to continue trending up this way while active sort of cooled off? There's a seasonality to it. So we'll see in next month's luxury video what that ends up doing. Same thing with how it's broken down. You can kind of see where most of the $1 million plus inventory is. And see, this is where in the beginning of the video, I was saying it was up almost 50%. It's actually 46%. So incoming right now at there are 165 properties that are now on the market that are over $1 million compared to just 95 in the previous year. So that's why months of supply are starting to tick up. If you want to live in Cumming because you want the lower property taxes, because you want the proximity to the lake, you are okay with the drive distance back to Atlanta, you know that they're spending $4.8 billion to add express lanes to 400 and a new toll road for the next 50 years, I think. And you also like the schools, you know, you're going to be able as a buyer to get some pretty good deals in Forsyth County. Now, other areas where that's trending up quite a bit, take a look at Milton. You know, Buckhead and In-Town, it's approximately the same year after year in terms of the number of offerings. But this is where the amount of active listings have just shot up. And then Johns Creek shot up as well. And that goes to show just how crazy that demand is, because 2.6 months of inventory. Speaking of pendings, you can see here that we are following a certain ebb and flow as well, but we have more pendings happening now than in previous years. This is really nice to see. And this is why our luxury market is just so different from the traditional market, because in the traditional market, it was doing something like this. It was underneath everything else and it was breaking downwards. Here, at least this year, we've got more pendings than at any other point over the last 4 years, right? And here's how it breaks down by city. So tons of properties pending in Milton right now. Take a look at Johns Creek. It's up as well. Surprise, surprise. And then Canton has a lot of inventory, but you can get some really nice property in Canton on acreage and build a really nice house on it. You get a little bit more for your money if you're willing to live just a little bit further out in Cherokee. Side note, if you're moving to Cherokee County from another county and you're over the age of 62, well, they do have a seniors exemption that will get rid of the school tax, but not right away. You actually have to live in Cherokee County for 5 years in order for that tax provision to take place when you file for it. If you already live in Cherokee and you move to another part of Cherokee, congratulations. You don't have to wait 5 years. But yeah, just interesting fact. Not sure if everybody's aware of that. So sales, number of closings per month. Again, we're over where we've been. This is very encouraging. Our luxury market is very strong this year compared to the most recent years. And we went through some really crazy years with all the post-health crisis stuff, and we're still outperforming those earlier 2020 years. Here's how it breaks down once again. So less sales this year in the month of June in Buckhead compared to last year. It's a pretty big drop, which is interesting because we're about to see that Buckhead's now got the highest dollar per square foot it's ever had. But that's a lot less sales in the month of June. In town is up. Milton is up. Failed listings. So what jumps out to me, and now a failed listing is an expired or a withdrawn. So after you go to market for X amount of time, whatever your time with your agent is, once it gets to the end of that timer and you haven't sold, your property expires. But you don't see as many expireds in this segment of the market as you do withdrawns. A withdrawn, if the property has just a little bit too much days on market and it's time to do a price adjustment, a lot of agents will withdraw the property, put it back in as a fresh listing with the new price, and they try and start that exposure over with the new MLS number, right? So when you take a look at the number of failed listings, in many parts of town, they're on the rise. The only place where it's down significantly is in Buckhead. Take a look at that. That's a significant drop in the amount year over year failed listings in the month of June. Meanwhile, our friend that's just crossed into that buyer's market territory, City Coming, has almost 3 times more failed listings this year than they did this time last year. Coincidence? I mean, it's everything tied up. I think that's a part of town that just was on fire for the last decade and a half, and maybe now it's starting to reach a little bit of saturation. All right, let's talk pricing, because everybody loves sales prices, and the median sales price for the greater Atlanta area for luxury properties is $1.35 million. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that there's an ebb and flow to it. It's up 1.1% year over year. You can see it went down, then it went up, then it went down, but it's kind of been relatively stable. If you take a look at these years, it was 1.350 for a couple of years. Like, that's a pretty static market when it comes to the median price. Now, the average price has trended up ever so slightly over the last couple of years. So it's at 1.608 million. And you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see to a certain extent, but there is an upward curve on this. So it's normal to see the average go up, median's right at the middle of that market. So let's dig into those numbers a little bit more. So Milton, these are all median prices. So Milton's now up to a median price of 1.52. It's up 5.7% year over year. You've got Alpharetta that is just a little bit under that median price. It went up negligibly. And then right at that median price-ish is Johns Creek, also up 2.7. Roswell's there, 3.7. In town, no change year over year. Where the biggest increase was Sandy Springs. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that there's a city that's up almost 200,000. While I was talking about Sandy Springs, its median sales price in $1 million plus properties shot up in 1 year by $186,000. That's 13.5%. So it broke records for Sandy Springs. And Buckhead over here is up at 2%, 1.685. We're almost at 1.7 at the middle of the market in Buckhead. Taking a look at other counties, we're going to go to Dekalb. So take a look at Decatur. It's down in the regular market, but for $1 million plus homes, it's up 8.5% year over year. Speaking of 8.5%, Brookhaven's up as well. It's now up to $1.531 million. There's a lot to love about Brookhaven, like I said earlier. Moving on to Cobb County. Marietta, down 2.6%, 1.315. Now, East Cobb is Marietta, but it's its own little ecosystem, right? We're going to look at the Walton High School, Pope, Lassiter, and Wheeler predominantly. And it's up 3.5%, $1.457 million is the median price there. Ackworth, we're covering Ackworth predominantly because of Governor's Town Club. Now that's down 4.5%. Governor's Town Club has a lot of inventory. Forsyth County, we've got the one city to look at. That's the city of Cumming. It's down 5.6%. Over in Cherokee County, Canton is up 1.6%. It's right at the median price. And then Woodstock's up negligibly at 1.155. I always think that Woodstock's going to have higher price stuff. And I think ultimately that's the perception. They've built so much in Woodstock over the years, but honestly, they've built a lot of townhomes. In Canton, they're building estate properties, and that's one of the big differences in pricing. Over in Gwinnett, you've got Duluth, which is down 6.1% at 1.407. I love downtown Duluth. It's awesome, by the way. If you haven't been there, check it out. And then Suwanee, 1.27 on the up and up, 1.6%. Taking a look at dollar per square foot, this isn't what I would ever recommend looking at for comping out a property, but it's kind of good to get an idea of what stuff's going for by square footage because it allows you to compare different micro markets very quickly to see either what kind of houses they're building in terms of size and price relative to size, right? So Buckhead just broke its own record. $480 a square foot. The way it's going, it's trending towards $500 a square foot. So when you look at average cumulative days on market, that's the number of days it takes to find a buyer for the property and to go under contract. If it falls out of contract, it also takes into consideration that next marketing period. It's the cumulative total days on market. So we're at 59 days for Atlanta. There's a couple of areas where it's gone down. So you look at Buckhead, it's trending down. You look at this sharp drop here in Milton, that's a big, big drop. And then a couple of areas where it's starting to trend up. So Johns Creek and then Brookhaven are two areas with some pretty sizable increases, but also is this a surprise? Out and coming from 40 to 60 days. That's a big, big increase in the number of days on market. It's a 50% increase. So what are properties ultimately selling for relative to their original asking price? Well, back in 2022, they were getting about their asking price. Properties over $1 million were selling for just about 100% of what they were asking for. Now, this year, properties are selling for 96.5% of what their original asking price is. So sellers are still trying the higher price, but ultimately they're negotiating away 3.5% at some point, whether it's price reductions along the way or a negotiated offer that comes in for less. On average, it's 96.5%. Let's dig into this a little bit more. So where in the metro can you get a deal on a house right now? Well, it's not in Johns Creek, I'll tell you that. So with everything leading up to this point, you can see why Johns Creek is performing as well as it is. It's also doing better than it did last year, and it's getting closer to its asking price with all those multiple offers. Now, where can you get a deal? Well, there are several spots. Take a look at Milton, for example, 95.6%. You've got over here in Sandy Springs at 94.9%. Canton, you can get a deal, nice deal. And then is it any surprise that sellers are negotiating away roughly 6% of their original asking price incoming with everything that's going on? Not really, right? So I like this chart because you can kind of see what that distribution of sellers getting their price works out to be. So when you take a look at last year sellers, 58% of sellers sold for less than asking. Now it's up to 64. So a full 2 out of 3 homes that come to market will sell for less than what their asking price is. You take a look at who's getting exactly their asking price, and it's 1 out of 6 here at 16%. And then above, last year 1 out of 4 sold for more than asking. This year it's 1 out of 5. So that's now trending downwards as well. So who out of the homes that are selling are paying concessions? We're going to look at that right now. So last year, 42% of all $1 million plus sales paid some kind of concession. This year, it's up to 45%. Is that the biggest increase? No, but it is trending upwards. And then when you break that down, last year, the average was just about $12,000. This year, it went up about $800 more in terms of what the average concession is. Hey, real quick, before I forget, if you're the type of person that likes to go through this information at your own pace, you're definitely going to want to grab the luxury report that I put together. It's in that first comment and in the description. And if you're in a part of town that I didn't cover in this video and you'd like to know more about what's happening in your neck of the woods, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. So what are some actionables that you can implement right now if you're in the market or you're about to be? So first, if you're buying, you now have an opportunity in many parts of town, not Johns Creek, but many other parts of town to make offers that are way more aggressive than you would have successfully been able to make in previous years. Still expect sellers to have some hesitancy at first. If the property's not been on the market for very long, you're going to have some resistance, but the longer that they're on the market, the more they're going to wonder how long it's going to take and the more aggressive your offers can become. They haven't felt that pain yet if they're just new to market. So pay attention to that, because the way that you structure your offers, you can get some really good deals on properties, especially if you take a look at Forsyth County right now. As a seller, think about what that means from the buyer's perspective and what it means for you. So put yourself in the buyer's shoes. You've got tons and tons of properties to consider. So you've got to nail your pricing. You've got to have a flawless marketing plan to maximize your exposure. And you better make sure that the condition of your property matches the price. If you're expecting a premium price, you need a premium condition to match that premium price. Consider having your house inspected before you go to market. Consider fixing what's found on the inspection report. And then at that point, when a buyer comes through and it's professionally staged, the marketing's on point, you're getting showings, and you finally go under contract, you won't have any surprises that could tank a deal once you're under contract. Because as you saw with those other properties, including some of those properties took 2 years to sell, 3 years to sell, right? If you miss your opportunity with a buyer, it might take a while for the next buyer to come along. So be very careful about the assumptions that you might make about the market. It's better to know exactly what's happening in your area so you can decide which way to go with it. But as a seller, proactiveness is the name of the game. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you on the next one.